Elena Vasquez walked down the long hallway of the Galactic Naval Academy. Her boots made soft clicking sounds on the metal floor. Behind her, she could hear the other cadets whispering and laughing. She knew they were talking about her again. "Look at the human," said Zextar, a tall Xanthari with blue skin and silver eyes. "She thinks she can access the high-security files." Krillax, a massive Krillian warrior covered in thick scales, laughed with a deep rumbling sound. "Humans are so funny. They think they belong here with real warriors." Valona, a crystalline Vex whose body sparkled like diamonds, added her musical voice to the mockery. "My species has been part of the galaxy for 10,000 years. Humans just learned to fly between stars 50 years ago. What could they possibly know about classified information?" Elena kept walking. She had heard these words many times before. For 6 months at the academy, the alien cadets had treated her and the other humans like children. They acted like humans were too young and weak to understand real military secrets. Elena's clearance level was listed as Basic Terran on her identification card. Everyone knew that was the lowest level possible. The other human cadets had stopped trying to access the secure areas after the first few weeks. They got tired of the rejection messages and the laughter from their classmates. But Elena was different. She was stubborn. Her grandmother had always told her that humans never gave up, no matter how hard things got. "Elena, please do not do this again," said her roommate Jixra, a kind Polarian with soft fur and large eyes. "The rejection will hurt and they will laugh at you more." Elena stopped in front of the massive vault door. It was made of some metal she had never seen before. The surface was completely smooth except for a small panel with a hand scanner. Above the scanner, red lights blinked in a pattern that meant restricted access. "I have to try," Elena said quietly. "Something feels different today." The group of alien cadets gathered behind her. Elena could feel their eyes watching her. Some looked amused. Others looked bored. A few seemed almost sorry for her. "This is the Advanced Strategic Archive," announced Zextar loudly. "Only senior officers and high-level species have access. My father, who commands 3-star fleets, has level 7 clearance. Even he cannot open this door." Elena placed her hand on the scanner. The device felt cold against her palm. A blue light swept across her hand 3 times. She held her breath and waited for the familiar words. "Access denied. Insufficient clearance level." But the words did not come. Instead, the scanner made a sound Elena had never heard before. It was like a deep musical note that seemed to come from inside the walls. The red lights above the scanner turned green. Then they turned gold. Then they turned a color that Elena could not name but somehow felt in her bones. A voice spoke from the door. It was not the usual computer voice that gave rejection messages. This voice was older and deeper. It sounded like it had been waiting for a very long time. "Biometric scan complete. Identity confirmed. Elena Maria Vasquez, Terran Operative Designation 77 Alpha. Access level Deathworld. Welcome home, daughter of Earth." The hallway became completely quiet. Elena could hear her own heartbeat. She could hear the soft humming of the Academy's life support systems. She could hear Jixra's shocked breathing behind her. The vault door began to open. It did not slide to the side like normal doors. Instead, it split apart in sections, folding back like the petals of a flower. Each section was thicker than Elena's body. As it opened, a warm wind flowed out, carrying scents that reminded Elena of home. Rain on soil, growing plants, and something wild and free. "That is impossible," whispered Valona. Her crystalline body was flickering with confused colors. Krillax stepped backward. His warrior training made him reach for weapons that were not there. "Deathworld clearance? That classification does not exist in any database I know." Zextar's silver eyes were wide with shock. "The archive has been sealed for 300 years. My professor said it contained information too dangerous for any current species to access." Elena looked at her hand. It looked the same as always. She looked at her reflection in the polished metal of the door. She looked like the same human girl who had been struggling with basic tactical training that morning. But something had changed. She could feel it in the air around her. "Elena," Jixra said softly, "what is Deathworld clearance?" Elena did not know. She had never heard the term before. But as she looked into the open vault, she felt something wake up inside her mind. It was like remembering a dream that had been forgotten for years. Images flashed through her thoughts. Vast oceans under storm clouds. Creatures with teeth like knives, ice that could kill in minutes, and humans who fought against all of it and survived. I think, Elena said slowly, it means I am not who I thought I was. The alien cadets moved closer, but carefully. Elena noticed that they stayed several steps away from her now. Even Krillax, who was trained to fight creatures twice his size, looked nervous. Should we call the instructors? Asked a small Flickarian cadet whose name Elena had never learned. No, said Zextar. If this human has Deathworld clearance, then the instructors already know about it. They have always known. Elena looked at her classmates. For months they had treated her like a child who needed protection. They had laughed at her attempts to prove herself. They had acted like humans were weak and useless. But now they looked at her with something she had never seen before. Fear. You should go back to your rooms, Elena said. Her voice sounded different to her own ears. It sounded stronger. I think I need to go inside alone. Elena, be careful, Jixra said. Whatever is in there, it was locked away for a reason. Elena nodded. She understood that her friend was worried. But she also understood that the door had not opened by accident. It had been waiting for her. Maybe it had been waiting for any human. Or maybe it had been waiting specifically for her. Either way, she knew she had to go inside. As she stepped toward the entrance, the alien cadets moved further back. Elena turned to look at them one more time. These beings came from species that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. They had technology that could destroy planets and wisdom that came from ages of experience. But right now they looked like children who had discovered that monsters were real. If I do not come back out, Elena said, tell the instructors that the lock recognized me as Terran Operative 77 Alpha. Tell them the door said I was going home. Elena walked into the vault. Behind her, the massive door began to close. The last thing she heard was Zextar saying something in his own language. She did not understand the words, but she understood the tone. He sounded like someone who had just realized that everything he thought he knew about the universe was wrong. The door sealed shut with a sound like thunder. Elena was alone in the darkness, waiting to discover what Deathworld clearance really meant. Elena stood in complete darkness for several seconds. Then lights began to turn on around her one by one. They were not the bright white lights used in the rest of the academy. These lights were softer and warmer, like sunlight filtering through leaves. The room was much larger than she had expected. The ceiling stretched high above her head and she could not see the far walls. Everywhere she looked, there were shelves filled with data crystals, holographic projectors, and storage devices she did not recognize. But what caught her attention were the symbols marked on everything. The symbols looked familiar, but Elena could not remember where she had seen them before. They were carved into the walls, painted on the storage containers, and glowing softly on display screens throughout the room. As she stared at them, she felt a strange sensation, like her brain was trying to remember something important. A holographic display activated in front of her. A woman appeared, but the image was fuzzy and kept flickering. The woman looked human, but she was wearing a uniform Elena had never seen. It was black with silver markings that matched the symbols on the walls. If you are seeing this message, the hologram said, then at least one human has reached the required security clearance. My name is Admiral Sarah Chen, and I was the last commanding officer of the Terran Defense Initiative. This recording was made in the year 2387, shortly before the final phase of Operation Guardian began. Elena stepped closer to the display. The year 2387 was over 200 years ago, but according to her history classes, humans had not even left their home solar system until 2420. This recording should not exist. The information you are about to learn is classified at the highest possible level, Admiral Chen continued. Everything your people have been told about human history is a carefully constructed lie. We created this lie to protect not just humanity, but every peaceful species in the galaxy. The hologram changed. Now Elena was looking at a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Thousands of star systems were marked with different colored lights. Most were blue or green, but a few were marked in red. Humans did not discover space travel on their own, the Admiral explained. We were contacted by the Galactic Council in the year 2156, but we were not invited to join the galactic community. We were recruited for a very specific purpose. Elena felt her heart beating faster. She sat down on a chair that had not been there moments before. The room seemed to be responding to her needs automatically. 2,000 years ago, a species called the Devourers swept through this galaxy. They consumed everything in their path: planets, civilizations, entire star systems. The surviving species barely escaped with their lives. After the Devourers disappeared, the Council made a terrible decision. They decided to create a weapon. The display changed again. Now Elena was looking at a blue and green planet that she recognized immediately. It was Earth, but it looked different somehow. More dangerous. The Council found a world that was perfect for their plan. It was beautiful, but it was also the most hostile environment they had ever discovered. They called it a Class 12 Deathworld. The gravity was crushing. The weather was violent. The native life forms were designed to kill each other. Most importantly, the conditions changed constantly, forcing any intelligent life to adapt or die. Elena stared at the image of her home world. She had always known that Earth was more dangerous than other planets. Her alien classmates often talked about how peaceful their homeworlds were, but she had never thought of Earth as a weapon. The Council seeded Earth with genetic material from their own species, Admiral Chen said. But they did not try to make the environment safer. Instead, they made it worse. They caused ice ages, asteroid impacts, volcanic eruptions, and massive climate changes. They wanted to create a species that could survive anything. The image showed Earth through different time periods. Elena saw massive sheets of ice covering continents. She saw volcanoes that turned the sky black. She saw creatures that looked like nightmares hunting in dark forests. The plan worked better than the Council had hoped. Humans evolved not just to survive on Earth, but to fight it and win. Every generation became stronger, smarter, and more adaptable. But the Council never told humans why they had been created. They waited and watched, hoping they would never need to activate their ultimate weapon. Elena understood now why the alien cadets had looked so afraid. They had not been mocking a weak species. They had been mocking the galaxy's last line of defense. For the past 300 years, humans have been secretly integrated into galactic society, the Admiral continued. Every human you think is a civilian, trader, or student is actually a trained operative. We have been placed in every major government, military organization, and strategic location in the galaxy. We are not explorers learning about the universe. We are guardians protecting it. The holographic map reappeared, but now Elena could see thin lines connecting all the star systems. The lines were marked with human symbols. There were thousands of them. Your clearance level is called Deathworld because that is what you are, Elena. You are a daughter of the most dangerous world in the galaxy. You were born and raised to fight battles that would destroy any other species. The combat training you have received at the Academy is considered basic education by human standards. Elena thought about her training. The alien cadets had struggled with exercises that seemed simple to her. They complained about physical conditioning that she found relaxing. They were amazed by her ability to stay calm during emergency simulations that reminded her of childhood games on Earth. Every human cadet has this same clearance level, Admiral Chen said, but the activation requires specific circumstances. The system only reveals the truth when it detects that the galaxy is in danger. The room began to change around Elena. Walls slid apart to reveal additional chambers filled with equipment she had never seen before. Weapons that hummed with contained energy. Armor that seemed to be made of liquid metal. Communication devices that were already receiving signals from across the galaxy. Elena Vasquez, the Admiral said, and Elena realized the recording was now responding to her specifically. Your genetic markers indicate that you are descended from the Siberian survival lines. Your ancestors lived through 7 separate ice ages. They hunted creatures that most sentient species would classify as mythological monsters. They developed fighting techniques that are still considered impossibly advanced by galactic standards. Elena stood up and walked to one of the weapon displays. When she touched the glass, it dissolved and allowed her to pick up a device that looked like a cross between a sword and a rifle. The moment her hands closed around it, she knew exactly how to use it. The knowledge was already in her mind, waiting. The activation protocol has begun, Admiral Chen said. Long-range sensors have detected familiar energy signatures approaching from deep space. The Devourers are returning, Elena. The galaxy's greatest nightmare is coming back, and you are part of the only species that was designed to stop them. Elena felt something change inside her mind. Memories that were not her own began to surface. Combat techniques passed down through generations. Survival instincts refined by millions of years of evolution on a world that tried to kill everything that lived on it. Strategic knowledge that had been programmed into human genetics by the Council's best military scientists. "You must contact your fellow operatives," the Admiral said. "The human network spans every inhabited world in the galaxy. They are all receiving activation signals now. The time for pretending to be weak has ended." Elena looked at her reflection in a mirror that had appeared on the wall. She still looked like the same young woman who had walked into this room. But now she could see what the alien cadets had somehow sensed. There was something in her eyes that had not been there before. Something wild and dangerous and utterly human. "Welcome to your real education, Operative 77 Alpha," Admiral Chen said. "It is time to show the galaxy why the Council created the children of Earth." Elena moved deeper into the archive, guided by instincts she had not known she possessed. The room seemed to unfold before her like a maze that rearranged itself, to show her exactly what she needed to see. She passed displays filled with weapons, star charts, and tactical information that made her academy training look like children's games. A massive holographic display activated as she entered what appeared to be the central chamber. The image showed a galaxy map, but this one was different from anything she had seen in her classes. Entire sectors were marked in red with notation symbols that made her feel cold inside. "Historical Archive 7, announced a new voice. This was not Admiral Chen, but a computer system with a tone that suggested vast intelligence. "Accessing Devourer War records. Classification Extinction Event documentation." The galaxy map began to move, showing the passage of time. Elena watched as civilizations rose and flourished across thousands of star systems. Beautiful cities on peaceful worlds, space stations that gleamed like jewels, trade routes that connected species in harmony and prosperity. "Galactic Standard Year 1847, the computer said. "First contact with entity classification, Devourer. Initial reports dismissed as sensor malfunction." The display focused on the outer rim of the galaxy. A single red dot appeared, moving slowly from system to system. Each system it touched turned black and disappeared from the map. "The Devourers did not communicate," the computer explained. "They did not negotiate. They did not take prisoners or leave survivors. They consumed entire worlds, stripping them of all organic and technological matter. Planets were left as empty rocks drifting in space." Elena watched the red dots multiply and spread. The advance was slow at first, but it accelerated as more Devourer ships appeared. What had taken decades to destroy a few systems now consumed dozens of worlds in months. "Galactic Standard Year 1851, the computer continued. "Council emergency session called. 37 species contribute fleets to defensive effort. Project designation Final Stand." The map showed massive battle fleets moving to intercept the Devourers. Elena counted thousands of ships representing the combined military might of the galaxy's greatest civilizations. The battles that followed were marked with symbols that indicated complete destruction. The Council fleets were superior in technology and numbers, the computer said. However, the Devourers demonstrated adaptive capabilities beyond all projections. They learned from each engagement, modifying their tactics and equipment in real time. What began as tactical defeats became strategic disasters. Elena saw the battle reports scroll past faster than she could read them, but somehow her mind was processing the information automatically. She understood that the galaxy's military forces had not just lost to the Devourers. They had been completely outmatched by an enemy that treated war like a learning exercise. The Devourers' primary advantage was their origin environment, the computer explained. Long-range analysis determined that they evolved on a Class 15 Deathworld. This classification exceeds all previously documented hostile environments. The species was naturally adapted for total warfare on a planetary scale. Elena thought about Earth's classification as a Class 12 Deathworld. She tried to imagine something even more dangerous than her home planet. The idea made her feel small and afraid. "Galactic Standard Year 1853, the computer said. "Council Resolution 777 passed by unanimous vote. Project designation, Genesis Protocol." The display changed to show a detailed analysis of different planetary types. Elena saw hundreds of worlds ranked by hostility levels. At the top of the list was a planet she recognized. The Council's solution was simple in concept, but unprecedented in execution, the computer explained. They would create their own devourer-equivalent species. Earth was selected as the optimal development environment due to its extreme hostility combined with sufficient resources to support technological civilization. Elena watched as the Council's plan unfolded across centuries. She saw genetic material from dozens of species being combined and modified. She saw climate control systems being deployed to make Earth even more dangerous than it naturally was. She saw the careful cultivation of human development through controlled disasters. The human species was not allowed to develop naturally, the computer said. Every major evolutionary pressure was artificially enhanced. Ice ages were extended. Volcanic activity was increased. Predator species were genetically modified to provide maximum selective pressure. The goal was to create a species that viewed total warfare as normal environmental conditions. Elena felt a strange mix of pride and horror. Her ancestors had not just survived Earth's dangers. They had been forced to fight against deliberately enhanced threats designed by the galaxy's most advanced scientists. Human development exceeded all projections, the computer continued. The species demonstrated not only survival capability, but innovation under pressure. They developed cooperation strategies, technological advancement, and combat effectiveness that surpassed theoretical models. The display showed human history from the Council's perspective. Elena saw her species' wars, but now she understood they had been more than conflicts between nations. They had been training exercises on a planetary scale, preparing humanity for a battle the galaxy hoped would never come. Galactic Standard Year 2156, the computer said. First official contact with mature human civilization. Integration protocol initiated. Elena watched as humans were slowly introduced to galactic society. But this was not the story she had learned in school. Humans were not curious explorers discovering the universe. They were weapons being carefully positioned throughout the galaxy. The integration protocol required absolute secrecy, the computer explained. Humans were placed in every major population center, government facility, and strategic location. They were given cover identities as students, traders, researchers, and civilians. In reality, they were a distributed military force waiting for activation. Elena saw the scope of the human presence for the first time. There were millions of them scattered across thousands of worlds. All of them trained from childhood in combat techniques that other species could not even comprehend. All of them carrying genetic modifications that made them superior fighters. Galactic Standard Year 2587, the computer announced. Deep space monitoring stations detect devourer energy signatures. Return trajectory confirmed. Genesis protocol activation authorized. The current date appeared on the display. Elena realized that the devourers had been traveling through space for over 700 years, returning to finish what they had started. The galaxy had been living in peace while its greatest enemy slowly made its way back. Estimated time to first contact, 14 standard days, the computer said. All Genesis protocol assets activated. Deathworld clearance granted to operational personnel. Elena understood now why her clearance had activated today. Across the galaxy, every human was receiving the same revelation she was experiencing. The pretense was over. The galaxy's hidden guardians were finally being called to war. Probability analysis complete, the computer said. Current human population and strategic positioning provide optimal defensive coverage. Devourer technology has remained static during their absence. Human technological advancement and tactical development provide significant advantages. Elena felt something changing in her mind. The fear and confusion were being replaced by something else. Something that felt like coming home after a long journey. She was not just Elena Vasquez, confused cadet at a galactic academy. She was Elena Vasquez, descendant of Earth's greatest survivors, member of the species that had been forged in the crucible of the galaxy's most dangerous world. Additional data available upon request, the computer said. Priority recommendation: contact local human operatives and await strategic briefing. Elena looked around the chamber one more time. Everything made sense now. The way humans had been treated at the academy. The way they had been kept separate from advanced military training. The way their instructors had always seemed to be watching them carefully. They had not been students. They had been weapons in storage, waiting for the day they would be needed. That day had finally come. Elena emerged from the archive to find chaos throughout the academy. Emergency lights were flashing red in the corridors, and she could hear alarm sirens echoing from every direction. Students were running past her, their faces filled with panic and confusion. But Elena felt strangely calm as she walked through the disorder. Elena! Jixra appeared at her side, her fur standing on end with fear. Something terrible is happening. The instructors have locked down all the main buildings. They are calling for emergency assembly in the central hall. Elena looked at her roommate with new eyes. Jixra was a gentle creature from a peaceful world where the biggest predators were small animals that ate flowers. She had probably never experienced real danger in her entire life. "It will be all right," Elena said, placing a hand on Jixra's shoulder. "The instructors know what they are doing." "But the alarms," Jixra said. "And all the human students have disappeared. Where did they go?" Elena had not noticed until Jixra mentioned it, but she was right. As they walked toward the central hall, Elena could see dozens of alien students but no humans. It was as if her entire species had vanished from the academy in the hour she had spent in the archive. They reached the central hall to find over 1,000 alien cadets gathered in nervous groups. The normal mixing of different species was gone. Instead, Elena saw Zenthari clustering together, Krillians forming defensive positions near the walls, and smaller species hiding behind the larger ones. Admiral Thex Rain took the stage. He was a massive Krillian with battle scars covering his scales. Elena had always thought he was the most intimidating instructor at the academy. But now, after seeing the archive, she noticed something different about him. He looked worried. "Cadets," Admiral Thex Rain announced, his voice carrying easily through the large space. "We have received confirmation of an approaching threat to galactic security. All classes are suspended indefinitely. You will remain in your dormitories until further notice." A Zenthari cadet raised her hand. "Admiral, what kind of threat? And where are the human students?" Elena watched the Admiral's expression carefully. She could see him choosing his words with great care. "The human students have been transferred to advanced facilities for specialized training," he said. "They have skills that may be relevant to our current situation." "What skills?" demanded Krillax, the large Krillian student who had mocked Elena earlier. "Humans are the weakest species in the academy. What could they possibly do that we cannot?" Admiral Thex Rain was quiet for a long moment. Elena could see him struggling with how much to reveal. "You will understand soon enough," he said finally. "For now, return to your dormitories. Follow all instructions from Academy security. Do not attempt to access restricted areas." As the crowd began to disperse, Elena felt her personal communication device activate. The message was short and was written in symbols she somehow understood immediately. "Report to Hangar 7. Operation Deathworld is active." Elena slipped away from Jixra and made her way to the hangar levels. The corridors here were different from the ones she knew. Security doors had opened to reveal passages that had been hidden. Emergency lighting had been replaced with the same warm illumination she had seen in the archive. Hangar 7 was larger than any space she had seen at the academy. More importantly, it was filled with humans. Elena recognized some of them as fellow cadets, but others were adults she had never seen before. All of them were wearing the same black uniforms with silver markings that Admiral Chen had worn in her recording. "Elena Vasquez," said a voice behind her. She turned to see a woman who looked to be in her 40s with graying hair and eyes that seemed to see everything. "I am Commander Sarah Martinez," the woman said. "I have been monitoring your development since you arrived at the academy. You have done well to maintain your cover for so long." "Cover?" Elena asked. "I was not maintaining a cover. I thought I was really a student." Commander Martinez smiled. "The best covers are the ones the operative believes are real. You were raised to think you were a normal human girl who wanted to join the galactic military, but your genetic markers, your instinctive reactions, and your psychological profile all indicated you were ready for activation." Elena looked around the hangar. She could see hundreds of humans preparing equipment she did not recognize. Some were working on weapons that seemed to bend light around them. Others were studying holographic displays that showed star charts marked with tactical information. "How many of us are there?" Elena asked. "Approximately 12 million active operatives throughout the galaxy," Commander Martinez replied. "Another 50 million in deep cover positions. We represent less than 1% of the human population, but we are positioned at every critical strategic location. Elena felt dizzy. 50 million people have been living secret lives? Not secret, the commander corrected. Hidden in plain sight. The accountant who processes shipping manifests at the main spaceport on Zenthari Prime. The maintenance worker who services communication arrays on Vex colony worlds. The researcher studying agricultural techniques on Krillian farming planets. All of them are trained operatives who have been waiting for this day. A new alarm began to sound, different from the emergency sirens. This one had a deep rhythmic tone that seemed to resonate in Elena's bones. That is the activation signal, Commander Martinez explained. Every human in the galaxy is hearing it right now. Within the next 6 hours, our people will reveal themselves and begin taking control of strategic assets. Elena watched as the humans around her moved with sudden purpose. They were no longer acting like students or civilians. Their movements were precise and coordinated, like a military unit that had trained together for years. What about the aliens? Elena asked. What will happen to them? They will be protected, Commander Martinez said. That is our primary mission. The Devourers are returning, and the peaceful species of the galaxy have no defense against them. We will evacuate non-combatants to secure locations and establish defensive perimeters around inhabited worlds. Elena thought about Jixra and the other alien cadets. They had spent months treating humans like inferior beings, not knowing they were surrounded by their protectors. Will they understand? Elena asked. Eventually, the commander replied. Right now they will be confused and frightened. Their instructors are explaining the situation to them. Some will accept it quickly. Others will need time to process the truth. A holographic display activated in the center of the hangar. Elena could see a three-dimensional representation of local space, with dozens of ships moving between star systems. But these were not the sleek, peaceful vessels used by galactic civilization. These ships looked like they had been built for war. The Devourer advanced scouts will arrive in this system in 8 days, Commander Martinez announced to the assembled humans. We have that long to prepare our defenses and evacuate civilians. After 700 years of planning, it is time to show the galaxy what the children of Earth can do. Elena looked at her hands. They looked the same as they had that morning. But she could feel the knowledge and training that had been programmed into her genes beginning to surface. Combat techniques that her conscious mind had never learned. Strategic thinking that seemed to come from instincts older than civilization. The ability to remain calm and think clearly in situations that would paralyze other species. She was no longer just Elena Vasquez, confused cadet. She was Elena Vasquez, Terran Operative 77 Alpha, guardian of the galaxy and daughter of the most dangerous world in the universe. The war for galactic survival was about to begin, and humanity was finally ready to fight it. The Devourer fleet dropped out of hyperspace like a storm made of metal and death. Elena watched from the command bridge of the human battleship Earthborn as enemy vessels filled the view screen. There were hundreds of them, each one larger than the biggest ships in the galactic fleet. Their hulls were black and seemed to absorb light, making them look like holes cut out of space itself. Contact in 6 minutes, announced the tactical officer. Elena had learned his name was Marcus Chen, and he was a descendant of the admiral who had made the recordings in the archive. Like her, he had spent years pretending to be a simple maintenance worker on a trading station. Civilian evacuation status? Asked Captain Rodriguez. She had been Elena's history instructor at the academy, teaching classes about peaceful exploration while secretly planning for galactic war. 87% complete, reported Lieutenant Kim. Elena remembered her as the quiet girl who had worked in the academy library. Now she was coordinating the evacuation of 3 star systems, while simultaneously managing human infiltration teams on dozens of worlds. Elena looked out at the space around them. The human fleet was much smaller than the approaching Devourer force, but she was beginning to understand that numbers were not everything. The ships around her had been built in secret over centuries, using technology that combined the best of galactic science with innovations that could only come from a species raised on a Deathworld. Elena, Captain Rodriguez said, take your squad and prepare for boarding operations. The Devourers will try to capture our ships to study our technology. We cannot allow that to happen. Elena nodded and moved toward the launch bay. Her squad consisted of 12 humans who had all spent the last few years in various cover roles throughout the galaxy. There was James, who had been a cook at a diplomatic station, Sarah, who had worked as a translator for trade negotiations, David, who had been a teacher at an alien school for gifted children. All of them were now wearing armor that seemed to flow like liquid metal while providing protection that could stop weapons capable of destroying buildings. All of them carried weapons that had been designed specifically to fight an enemy that could adapt to any threat. "Remember," Elena told her squad as they prepared their assault craft, "the Devourers learn from every encounter. We can only use each tactic once. Stay flexible and trust your instincts." The first wave of Devourer ships reached the human fleet. Elena watched through the tactical display as the engagement began. She expected to see the overwhelming assault that had destroyed the galactic fleets 700 years ago. Instead, she saw something that made her feel proud to be human. The human ships moved like they were dancing. They did not form the neat battle lines that alien military doctrine preferred. Instead, they flowed around the Devourer vessels like water, attacking from unexpected angles and disappearing before the enemy could respond. "Devourer adaptive systems engaging," reported Marcus. "They are modifying their tactics." "Good," Captain Rodriguez replied. "Let them adapt to this." Elena watched as the human fleet suddenly changed its entire approach. Ships that had been fighting individually now formed coordinated groups. Weapons that had been firing energy beams switched to projectile attacks. Battle formations that had been loose and flowing became tight and geometric. The Devourers tried to adapt again, but the humans had already shifted to a third tactical approach. Elena realized she was watching something that no other species could do. Humans were not just fighting the Devourers, they were out-adapting them. "First boarding wave incoming," announced Lieutenant Kim. "Elena, you are clear for launch." Elena's assault craft shot out of the Earthborn toward a Devourer vessel that was trying to break through the human defensive line. As they approached, she could see the enemy ship more clearly. It was covered in weapons that moved like living things, tracking targets and firing with deadly precision. 10 seconds to contact," said James, who was piloting the craft with skills that made Elena wonder what his real background was. Remember, these things killed civilizations that had been spacefaring for thousands of years. Elena felt her heart beating faster, but not with fear. This was the feeling she had experienced during combat training when everything suddenly became clear and simple. This was what humans were designed for. The assault craft penetrated the Devourer ship's hull through a breach created by human plasma weapons. Elena and her squad moved through corridors that seemed to shift and change around them. The ship was trying to confuse them, but humans had evolved to navigate through environments that changed constantly. They encountered their first Devourers in what appeared to be the ship's command center. Elena had expected monsters, but what she saw were creatures that looked almost elegant. They were tall and thin, with movements that suggested perfect coordination and intelligence. But when they turned toward the humans, Elena saw eyes that held nothing but hunger. The battle lasted less than 30 seconds. Elena moved with speed and precision that surprised even her. Her weapons found targets before her conscious mind had identified them. Her squad flowed around obstacles and threats like they had trained together for years instead of days. When the fighting ended, 12 Devourers lay dead, and not one human had been seriously injured. "How?" Sarah asked, staring at her weapon. "I was a translator last week. How did I do that?" 700 years of genetic programming," Elena replied. "We were designed for this." They moved deeper into the ship, searching for the central control systems. Elena began to understand something that the original galactic fleets had never realized. The Devourers were perfectly adapted for conquest, but they had one critical weakness. They had never faced an enemy that was adapted for the same thing. "Elena to Earthborn," she spoke into her communicator. "Target ship neutralized. Moving to secondary objectives. Acknowledged," came Captain Rodriguez's voice. "All boarding teams report similar success. The Devourers are having difficulty adapting to our combat techniques." Elena smiled as she planted charges that would destroy the Devourer vessel's critical systems. Of course they were having difficulty. The Devourers had learned to fight against species that preferred peace and only fought when they had to. Humans were a species that had been fighting for survival every day for millions of years. As Elena's squad returned to their assault craft, she looked back at the alien students who had mocked her for months. They were safe now, evacuated to protected worlds far from the battle. They would never have to experience the terror of facing an enemy like the Devourers. That was why humans existed, not to conquer or rule, but to stand between the peaceful species of the galaxy and the darkness that wanted to consume them. "Elena," came James's voice over the communicator. "You need to see this." Elena looked out through the viewports of their craft. The space battle was ending. Devourer ships were retreating or destroyed. The human fleet had not just survived the first engagement. They had won it decisively. "How many ships did we lose?" Elena asked. 3 damaged, none destroyed," James replied. "The Devourers lost 47 vessels." Elena felt a moment of savage satisfaction. 700 years ago, the Devourers had swept through the galaxy like an unstoppable force. Today they had met their match. They had met the children of Earth and learned what it meant to face a species that considered total warfare to be a normal part of childhood development. "Contact from the Devourer fleet," announced Lieutenant Kim's voice over the fleet communication channel. "They are requesting negotiations." Captain Rodriguez's response was immediate. "Inform them that humans do not negotiate with species that consume civilizations. They can surrender unconditionally, or they can continue fighting. Those are their only choices." Elena looked out at the stars and thought about her alien classmates. They would need time to understand what humans really were. Some of them might never fully accept it, but they would be alive to make that choice. And that was what mattered. The galaxy had spent 700 years preparing for the return of its greatest nightmare. Today, that nightmare had learned to be afraid of something else. It had learned to fear the species that turned nightmares into training exercises. The children of Earth had come home, and they had brought the galaxy's enemies with them into the dark.